Can AI boost Cracker Barrel's stagnant sales? Cracker Barrel is a successful nationwide chain of restaurants and gift shops concentrated in the American South, but also with many locations in more rural areas, usually off highways throughout the country. Most Cracker Barrels are located near highways or interstate highways, etc., and they attract most of their customers from interstate and intrastate travelers who generally see a billboard or some other way of knowing about Cracker Barrel, word of mouth, and have the food. About 20% of their sales are gifts in the gift shop. Cracker Barrel grew from a single store in Lebanon, Tennessee in 1969 to over $2 billion in revenues in 2000. So it's dramatic growth for several decades. However, its sales have stagnated over the last couple of decades. And we see here their sales adjusted for inflation, adjusted for the U.S. CPI, the Consumer Price Index. And we can see that their real sales have been pretty stagnant the last 20 years or so. Is there something that new technology might be able to do for Cracker Barrel or other stores, restaurants, etc., businesses that could boost their sales? Today, there's a plethora of advertising methods. There are old things like billboards, which are the main marketing used by Cracker Barrel. There are all sorts of new methods: television, radio, Yelp, Facebook, Google Ads, podcasts, a wide and continually growing list of methods. Cracker Barrel has tried to diversify out of billboards into other types of advertising over the last 20 years. You can see here in blue their spending on billboards, and 20 years ago almost all their advertising expenditures were on billboards. Since then, what they call other media, which includes radio, television, internet, various kinds of marketing efforts, the orange bars here, has grown, and they have decreased the amount spent on the billboards, which they continue to credit most of their business coming from the billboard advertising. Today, about a third of their $89 million in 2022 spent on advertising was spent on billboards. Despite all of this and an expansion in advertising, especially in non-billboard formats, their actual inflation-adjusted sales have not improved. This is an old problem. There's a famous saying, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half. This saying is attributed to John Wanamaker, who owned a giant department store in Philadelphia in the 1800s. And it's still true today. What if you could take the money wasted on bad advertising methods and spend it on methods that work? To do that, you need to understand the mathematical relationship, if one exists, between the money spent on, for example, billboards and other media, in the case of Cracker Barrel. By some rule or some formula, this is turned into sales, actual revenues. Now, our math recognition technology is an artificial intelligence technology that uses AI methods, pattern recognition, other methods to look at data and do something that usually human analysts, financial analysts, scientists, and others try to do, often unsuccessfully, which is to identify the mathematical formula, for example, relating inputs to outputs. Here we show a couple of examples of the kinds of models in a large database inside of our math recognizer. So it looks at the data, often in higher dimensions than humans can visualize, and it pulls out models that may match the data. Here we have a couple of simple examples. The Cauchy distribution is not the same as, but similar to the bell curve you may have encountered in grading in high school or college. The bell curve is pretty easy to identify, but there are many special functions, differential equations, many other things in mathematics, a vast field, which most analysts don't even know about, and which can be very difficult for a human being to recognize in the data. Our system automates this process of identifying and recognizing the data. So in some respects, it's like speech recognition or computer vision, except applied specifically to mathematical problems. So here's a simple math model that the math recognizer found for the data from the annual reports of Cracker Barrel. The green shows the annual revenues of Cracker Barrel since 2004, and the blue shows the model. The model considers as inputs the money spent on billboards, the money spent on other media like radio, television, and internet, and also considers the U.S. gross domestic product, or GDP, from the U.S. Federal Reserve. Why do we do that? It's to represent the state of the economy. There are factors out of the control of the business which we need to take into account to properly model the revenues. We can't just consider the advertising expenditures, the things the company controls. There's also external environment factors. For example, we can see this sharp drop in early 2020. This is the COVID pandemic lockdowns, which had a severe effect on Cracker Barrel. This is something Cracker Barrel can't control. Doesn't matter what their advertising is. We need to have some measurement like the GDP to show us these environmental conditions. Once we have a model that predicts the sales we are likely to see given various inputs, various advertising, then we can optimize the outputs. We can maximize the outputs, the sales, by distributing the money, advertising money. Here are the $89 million a year budget from 2022. Now the program in this case, this model, indicates you should put all your money into the other media, not into the billboards. I'll say a little bit more about that in the conclusion. Despite this, there's actually a negative effect that shows up in this model from the GDP. As the GDP is increasing, according to the model, which may not be reality, but the model indicates that Cracker Barrel is actually running to stay in place for some reason. So if they don't boost their advertising, they'll actually start losing ground. Now, we can't be sure if that's true. That's what the model indicates. There are various phenomena that can produce that, such as GDP is related to inflation, and also some businesses actually suffer as the economy grows. Very inexpensive restaurants may be an example of that, where people start substituting more expensive food, eating out, or fancier groceries for these cheaper places to eat. Those are some examples of how that can happen. So just continuing this doesn't seem to do you too much good. Let's consider what happens if Cracker Barrel makes a large increase in the amount of money that they're spending on advertising, and in this case, the so-called other media, radio, television, etc. Let's pop it up from $89 million by $60 million a year to $150 million, something that Cracker Barrel might be able to afford either from their internal money or through a bond issue or some other activity. Here we see a big jump. We go from about $3.2 billion in sales in 2022 up to $4 billion, about an $800 million increase in sales. Here's zoomed in on it a little bit better. This is the 22 value of 3.2. It's a little over 3.2 billion, and it jumps up by 800 million according to the model. That's an important caveat. Is this worth it for Cracker Barrel to do it? That depends on what their profit margin is on this. They're spending an additional $60 million a year in advertising. They have to have a margin of at least 7.5% on these sales. They have to make a profit of at least 7.5% of that $800 million in order to actually cover the cost of the increased advertising. If Cracker Barrel is an unusually, but not unheard of, profitable restaurant chain and gift shop, then in fact this might be to their advantage. Most restaurants have profit margins of 3 to 5%. However, numbers as high as 15% are sometimes encountered. It depends on Cracker Barrel's business and whether the model is correct. I've written up a short article on this with the graphs and more discussion of the issues, which you can see here. So we have a bit.ly short URL, the full URL, and you can scan this QR code with your phone or with software that scans a QR code to give you the URL. In conclusion, AI may be able to tell Cracker Barrel or similar businesses how they might redistribute their spending or increase spending on advertising to boost their sales substantially. The Cracker Barrel data is very rough. It's just nationwide sales, nationwide how much they spend on a single category, other media, and another category, billboards. It's very rough. To do a really reliable predictive analysis requires looking at their internal accounting, the geographical distribution, where the billboards are, where their stores are, linking the changes in sales to different advertising campaigns and other finer details. Without that, this is a very rough model. It could, in fact, be completely wrong. To really know for sure, we need to look at their financial accounting data of their advertising and other activities in detail. If you're interested in what we do, you can contact us, and we can sign a non-disclosure agreement. We can anonymize your data, so names of customers, lots of details are removed. We never see them. You never have to worry about us leaking them or somehow getting out, because we never have that information. We just have code names. We can even scale the dollar amounts by some constant in order to hide your financial details even more. So again, even if the information somehow got out, it would be a very limited use to a competitor. So if you're interested, you can talk to us. We can take a look at your data and see if our math recognizer is able to identify a good model or models and give you real information. If we can't do that, we wouldn't continue further in any discussion. If we think we have a good model, then we can discuss maybe charging some fee for actual detailed information on how you can boost your sales using AI. You can contact me, John McGowan, at CEO@mathematical-software.com. This concludes this video presentation. If you like this video, please click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. You can avoid internet censorship by subscribing directly to our RSS news feed. Please consider sharing the link by email and on your website or blog, in addition to liking, upvoting, or sharing on increasingly censored, advertising beholden, big company social media. We have encountered such censorship. Mathematical Software is developing algorithms and software to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and increasing the predictive power of the results. You can support our work financially by subscribing on our Patreon page, https://www.patreon.com/mathsoft, or scanning the QR code in the lower right corner.